Hello and welcome to episode 98. Wow, of A Slice of Medieval. Today it's Derek and I just having a look at a family that I probably know a little bit more about than Derek does, but we decided
a lot more about than Derek does.
So we decided to look at one of the more prominent medieval families who are not so well known today, simply because they did die out in medieval times. If you have read any of my books, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the House of Warenne, for whom I wrote the book, Defenders of the Norman Crown, Rise and Fall of the Warenne Earls of Surrey. So this is my topic. I'm hoping I can answer all the questions.
Well, I guess the first question is to talk about the origins of the Warrens, where they came from, and why, therefore, they're involved in English history at all. Because the name Warenne doesn't sound particularly English, does it?
No, and actually, it has been anglicised. They're from a village called Warenne in Normandy, but somehow that's been changed to Warren as they moved along. So they're actually Normans, which probably doesn't come as a very big surprise. So guess when they arrived? 1066. William de Warenne, who was made Earl of Surrey just literally a couple of months before his death in 1088, came over with William the Conqueror and fought at Hastings. And he's one of the few people we know actually fought at the Battle of Hastings, because on his deathbed, William the Conqueror mentioned the fact that they'd been together fighting at the Battle of Hastings.
He remembered it on his deathbed. What did he say? Well, finally, now you're going to die, having survived this long.
Well, I probably remember, it was probably, it was Audric Vitalis who recorded it. It's probably, reminiscing, William, when we came over as young men fighting at Hastings.
We were younger.
Wasn't that a good pub brawl?
Yeah, I think it might have been a bit more than that, but yeah.
Yeah. But,
so he came over with William, fought at Hastings.
Yeah, and he was rewarded.
And was he one of the more important comrades of William, or?
Yeah, he was one of the ones who helped with the planning. He was rewarded with lands in Lewes in Sussex for his part in the conquest. He was a distant cousin of William the Conqueror. Their grandmothers were sisters, I think it was. And he was a career soldier. He'd been a co-general at the Battle of Mortimer in 1054. He can't have been more than 20 or maybe late teens. He was a really young man at the time, and he was one of the two generals involved. So he was a career soldier, and you see that all through his life. He acted as a justiciar for William the Conqueror when he went back to Normandy. William de Warenne stayed in England and helped run the country. He was one of the generals who fought against Walt the Other of Northumberland in the revolt of the Earls. He was involved in the harrying of the North. That's probably when he was given Conisbrough Castle and the honour of Conisbrough as a reward for helping out in the harrying of the North, and also to help control that area of Yorkshire.
He got Sandal Castle at some point. Was that at the same time, do you think?
No, they got Sandal Castle a little bit later.
Right, okay.
It might have been either later in the first Earl's life or just as the second Earl became Earl. I can't remember offhand, but...
So he was pretty much a pillar of the Norman conquest.
Yeah,
really.
He was.
Sort of before, during and after, really.
Yeah. And I mean, he wasn't it's not like he was this great noble heroic character. He did some pretty nasty things, he's stealing sheep in Norfolk and things like that. And he upset the Abbey of Ely so much that when he died, his second wife tried to give the Abbey money to pray for William de Warenne, and they refused it.
Wow.
So an Abbey refusing money.
Exactly. That's. I wasn't thinking they'd refuse to pray for him, but the fact they'd refuse
Yeah,
money is a serious
he
thing.
really must have pissed them off.
But so sheep, he stole their sheep. I mean, so he's based in Lewes, but he just thought I'll go and do some sheep stealing in Norfolk.
Well, now in 1070, his brother-in-law, Frederick, had lands at Castleacre in Norfolk, and he was murdered by Hereward the Wake.
Oh, was he?
So William's wife, Gundrada, inherited Frederick's lands, and they built the medieval village. It's a planned village, so it's all within the town walls and
Oh,
things
right.
of Castleacre, with the castle on one end and a priory at the other
Is that
end.
still there?
Yes, Castleacre. The castle is very much. They're both very much a ruin, but it's
Yeah.
definitely worth a visit. The
Oh.
Castleacre Priory is absolutely gorgeous.
Mm.
But yeah, so with Frederick being killed, William de Warren's wife inherited his lands, and
Yeah.
he just kept. It wasn't so much that he stole sheep, that he appropriated the land that the sheep were on.
Oh, right. Okay. So he didn't
You
steal the
know,
sheep, he stole the land.
yeah, and people who were free men, he claimed he owned them and things like that. He was a bit of a ruthless character.
A sharp operator.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, typical Normans, I don't know,
I know,
storming in
but
and
he did have
stealing
one
our sheep.
yeah, and then he did try to ambush Hereward the Wake, because Hereward had killed his brother-in-law, so he tried to ambush Hereward.
I mean, Hereward was a rebel, if you were from the Norman perspective, wasn't he?
Yes,
So I guess
yeah, and an English hero.
I don't have that at the same level as sheep stealing. Actually,
No.
sheep stealing for me is much worse.
Yeah, he tried to ambush Hereward, and somehow he got struck by an arrow that was forceful enough to knock him off his horse, but he didn't get wounded. He was just knocked out. I still haven't worked out exactly how that happened.
Well, I guess if it hit his helm or
Mm,
part of his chain mail or something, I mean, there would be some velocity behind it,
yeah.
particularly if it was fired from that far away. Depending what sort of arrowhead it was and things like that, the shock might have knocked him off his
Mm,
horse. The surprise, losing his
yeah,
balance doesn't necessarily mean it's going to pierce chainmail.
that's true. It just seems to me like a bit of a Monty Python-esque
Yeah, well,
scene.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. I mean, did he say "ow"?
Yeah, exactly.
Who did that?
Tis but a
Who
scratch.
threw that?
Yeah, yeah. Tis but a scratch.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, I meant to do that.
Yeah, I wasn't using that arm anyway.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, he was a bit nasty at times. He could be harsh.
Hmm.
But from William the Conqueror's point of view, he was a solid citizen because he was a
Yeah.
big support. I mean, the harrying of the North wasn't great either, from the point of view of people being harried.
No.
So that was a fairly brutal policy, which clearly he had no worries about carrying out because the king wanted it.
Yeah, I do wonder with the harrying of the North. I'll say it here, and somebody will probably contradict me. But this idea of salting all the earth and that. I do wonder where they got so much salt from, whether or not it was as extensive as they say it was.
Well, it wouldn't have to be that extensive for somebody to have recorded that it happened and then for
Yeah.
it to get maybe a bit exaggerated. But I mean, the harrying of the North seems to have had a fairly devastating effect.
Yeah, definitely on the population, as in
Yeah,
killing the population and killing the animals, I think
yeah.
would have had more effect.
I think it's a generational thing, isn't it?
Mm,
Had a generational effect.
yeah, but then
Um,
they did, I mean, he did put Norman barons in places in Yorkshire then to
yeah.
control the population. So there was definitely enough population left for them to need controlling.
Well, he needed someone to collect taxes, didn't he, really?
Yeah,
Although how they were going to pay any
exactly.
taxes, I don't know
Yeah.
after that, but
So yeah, so that's William de Warenne, and he was married to Gundrada,
yes.
who for 800 years it was believed was the daughter of William the Conqueror and Matilda of Flanders.
Oh, yes, that's that one. Yeah, right. Yes, I
Yeah,
remember the controversy over that.
mainly because there's this copy of the foundation charter of Lewes Priory in Sussex, which was founded by Gundrada and William. And in the copy, it says William and his wife Gundrada, the daughter of King William. So everybody thought that Gundrada must have been William's daughter. And I looked into this extensively. There's loads of articles, particularly in the 19th century, arguing for Gundrada to be the daughter of William, but not Queen Matilda, to be a daughter of Queen Matilda from an earlier marriage than her marriage to William. Given that Gundrada had 3 brothers as well, and Matilda was still a teenager when she married William the Conqueror, that's quite a feat.
Yeah.
So they're all trying to argue how she was the daughter of William the Conqueror. But one historian actually found the original foundation charter of Lewes Priory, which makes no mention of her being the daughter of William the Conqueror.
So when was the copy made?
I think
then?
I think it was about 20 or 30 years after the original was made.
Yeah.
So it's either a monk who's can't copy, isn't very good at copying, or who wanted to give the priory royal links, because in those days, royal links meant more money.
Well, also, I guess they didn't necessarily know who she was 20 years later.
Yeah.
And they thought, well,
I
think she was the daughter of William the Conqueror.
Yeah.
Put that in.
It's how rumours start, isn't it? Yeah. But what gets me is how long these rumours lasted, because although they looked into it in the 19th century and they found the original foundation charter in the 19th century, when I was working as a tour guide at Conisbrough Castle in the early 1990s, they were still saying she was the daughter of William the Conqueror.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, she wasn't. So it's taken a while for it to filter through. I think mainly because we don't know the name of her father anyway.
Yeah.
If we could identify who her father was.
Yeah.
I think her father was probably a chap called Gerbod, who was the hereditary advocate of the monastery of Saint Bertin in Flanders. And because her brother was Gerbod, who was Earl of Chester for a short while. And he went back to Flanders to look after the family lands after his older brother Arnulf died.
Okay, too many names.
Yeah. But, well, Gerbod is famous because he was in the Flemish army in the Battle of Cassel when Matilda of Flanders' brother tried to steal Flanders from their nephew. Unfortunately, Gerbod accidentally killed the Count of Flanders, who was Queen Matilda's nephew. And he went on pilgrimage to Rome and told the Pope that he was going to cut off the arm that had killed his lord. And the Pope told him, no, don't do that. Just join a monastery. That's fine. We don't need mutilation in the Vatican. It's not happening. So they were high up in Flanders society and probably related to Matilda of Flanders somewhere, but we just don't know where. So the William and Gundrada themselves were both prominent people in their own right.
So it was a good marriage then?
It was a really good match and a really strong marriage. And I suppose looking at William, how powerful he became and how rich he became, he was the 4th richest man in England after the conquest. And he is, so the most recent figures, which includes Elon Musk, he's number 18 in the top 20 of the richest men in history.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's all those sheep he stole.
He's stealing sheep, turning people back into peasants when they were free men and all things like that. It's, but he was obviously a good businessman.
I think we can say, therefore, that his decision to go with William paid off quite well.
Yes, definitely.
It was a bit ironic that he was made Earl of Surrey, as you said earlier, just a few months before he died.
Yeah.
Why didn't you make him Earl of Surrey years before, do you think? Or was it not a thing?
It wasn't William the Conqueror. It was William II who made him an earl.
Oh, yeah, of course, 1088. It would be, yeah.
So I don't know why he didn't get it beforehand. Possibly just because the Earldom of Surrey I think it had to be created for him as well.
Yeah, it was the first creation of the Earldom of Surrey, wasn't it?
I think it's probably what they were doing at the time, moving towards giving these Norman lords English titles and earldoms.
Yeah.
To more assimilate them with England, because they still had their lands in Normandy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And of course, as we've said quite a number of times, we're at the beginning of this period where barons have lands in both England and Normandy,
Mm.
which causes them problems as time goes on. It's the beginning of that period where they kind of have to decide, am I an English lord or a Norman lord, or do I want to try and be both, which is increasingly difficult.
Yeah, well, the second Earl definitely had that issue because he supported William Rufus, William II. And then when William II died, he supported Robert, Duke of Normandy, against Henry I.
Yeah, William. So he supported William's elder brother, Robert of Normandy, against his younger brother, Henry.
Yes. So
Why did he do that? Do we know? Is that just because of the Norman land situation, or?
yeah, I think it was. He probably thought Robert had the greater right to the kingdom because Robert was the oldest son. I suppose a lot of barons who supported Robert also remembered that they were the oldest sons, and going handing things out to
Yeah,
younger sons doesn't help things. And in
no,
Normandy, the eldest son inheriting, primogeniture was well established in Normandy. Whereas in
yeah.
England, you had this affling idea of anyone in the royal family was throne worthy,
Hmm.
and it wasn't necessarily going to go to the eldest son.
But I mean, William the Conqueror ignored that primogeniture by making his son William Rufus, his second son, the heir, didn't he, or king?
Yeah, because he didn't, he hated Robert.
Yes, they
So,
didn't get on.
but he, no, and he couldn't, but he couldn't change the line of succession in Normandy because he'd already had, in 1066, before the Norman conquest, he'd already had all the Norman barons swear fealty to Robert
Yeah,
as his heir and the next Duke of Normandy.
yeah.
So he couldn't change that. But in England, he had free reign to actually disinherit Robert and hand the throne to William.
So do you think if Robert hadn't been Duke of Normandy, so if William II had ruled all of the things, do you think it would have been easier for Henry to take over both?
Probably.
Because the fact that Robert was Duke of Normandy
Yeah.
and sort of officially had that area that title,
Mm,
it needed to be contested, didn't it? Whereas if Henry was trying to inherit all of those things that William had, then it would have been perhaps a bit easier to get acceptance
yeah.
from the Norman lords.
I mean, you also have to remember that in between 1087 and 1100, when, William Rufus and Robert have got their two domains, Henry's landless with a little bit of money, well, a lot of money, but he sort of plays off
Yeah,
brother against
yeah,
brother in that, he sides with Robert and then he sides with William.
yeah.
So he's quite conniving in that he's just making the most of the fact that he's the baby brother and
Yeah,
he hasn't got any responsibilities.
I think it's really difficult at this remove to have any understanding at all of how those three brothers were regarded by either English or Norman lords, because
Mm,
we can have a view of it. We can say, well, it was like this, but in terms of what William de Warenne thought of those three individuals, we can have no idea at all, really.
no, no, exactly. We can only take that he did support Robert at first, but then Robert sort of hung him out to dry. Robert invaded England, and rather than there be a battle between Robert and Henry, they came to peace at the Treaty of Alton,
Yeah,
where Henry agreed to pay Robert an annual sum if Robert had just go back to Normandy.
yeah,
So Robert did. The only problem was, as part of the treaty, every English baron who'd supported Robert was disinherited from their English lands.
mm,
So they could return to Normandy and their Norman lands because,
yeah,
but their English lands were confiscated. This peeved off William de Warenne, mainly because he had lands in 13 counties by that point and
yeah,
was, like, remember, one of the richest men in England, and
yeah,
all his lands had just been confiscated. So
yeah. Not
he was
good.
peeved. Yeah. So he went back to Normandy with Robert and he approached Robert and said, look, I'm not happy. And it's all your fault because I supported you and now I've lost everything. Well, I've still got my lands in Normandy, but I had Castleacre,
Yeah.
Conisbrough Castle, Lewis Castle. You know, I had a lot and now I haven't got that. So Robert went back to England uninvited to Henry and said, that's not fair. Give William his lands back. And Henry said, I never invited you here and I told you not to come unless invited. So you are now going to lose the pension, which I think was £2,000 or £3,000 a year. I'm not paying you that anymore, but William de Warenne can have his lands back. So Warenne got his lands back and Robert lost out by supporting him. And in true gratitude, Warenne said, okay, I'm yours now, Henry.
For the next 10 minutes, I'll be completely loyal.
Yeah, well, for about the next 7 or 8 years, William kept a low profile. He stayed away from court. There's no, you know, he didn't witness many charters or anything. He sort of kept a low profile.
Kept his head down.
Yeah. But there was a personal issue as well, because William de Warenne had had his eyes on a certain young lady in the late 1090s and offered her marriage through William II. Said, you know, I'd like to marry Edith of Scotland. He did fancy the idea of having a royal bride.
Yeah.
And Edith of Scotland was one of the two daughters of Malcolm III and Margaret of Wessex. So she actually carried English royal blood as well as Scottish royal blood.
Yeah.
And William Rufus refused. So that upset him, especially when Henry then marries Edith of Scotland and changes her name to Matilda, and she's Queen of England. So he's a bit miffed with Henry about Henry getting his bride, where he sees
Right, okay, yeah.
So Henry offers William one of his own daughters, one of his illegitimate daughters.
Of which there were many.
In compensation, of which there were many. We don't know which one, unfortunately. If it was Juliana, then he had a lucky escape.
Yeah, close encounter.
Yeah. But the Archbishop of Canterbury put the kibosh on that one by saying that William and the proposed bride were too closely related because William and Henry were cousins. So William lost lands because he backed the wrong horse. Then he lost the brides he wanted because of Henry. So he was a tad miffed. But he did fight at the Battle of Tanchbray, and he did manage to keep one foot in either camp, in that while he was supporting Henry I after this disagreement with Robert of Normandy, his brother was in Normandy looking after the Warenne lands in Normandy. So his brother was on the side of Robert of Normandy. And when his brother was captured by Henry I's forces, William fought really well at the Battle of Tanchbray, so that he could claim at the end of it, go, actually, can you let my brother go now, please?
It wasn't uncommon, though, as time goes on, for families to split their interests in Normandy and England that way. Was it for one member of the family to be more responsible in Normandy and another one in England?
Yeah, and you do see this happen quite a bit in the Warenne family, to keep both their lands in both sides.
But the second William de Warenne did find a wife, and a pretty good one, actually.
He did. Yes, a very good one. He did. Unfortunately, she was somebody else's wife.
Well, there's always a catch, isn't there?
And if you believe Henry of Huntingdon, he kidnapped her, and her first husband dropped dead from the grief, and then he married her.
Well, it dropped dead for some reason.
Well, yeah, he did that. I think the thing is, she married William about 3 months after the death of her first husband, Robert de Beaumont, Earl of Leicester. So Henry of Huntingdon's decided they must have been having an affair for them to get married so soon after the death of the Earl.
But didn't, I might have this wrong, but didn't Robert de Beaumont marry her when she was really, really young?
She was 11 years old.
Wasn't there an issue about that?
Yes.
At the time.
Yeah, it was.
He was in his 50s.
Yeah, there was about 40 years between them.
Yeah.
She was 11 years old when they married. It was originally her father was trying to arrange the marriage.
I'm just thinking, we haven't actually said who she is.
Sorry, the lady is Isabel de Vermandois.
But she's Isabel, but she's sometimes called Elizabeth as well, just to confuse us, in case anyone was getting a firm grip
Yeah,
of what's going on.
Isabel and Elizabeth are often
Yeah,
it's the same name, just in different languages. So that's where the confusion comes from. And
yeah,
she was the granddaughter of Henry I, King of France. So she definitely had royal blood. And yeah, so she was married to Robert de Beaumont when she was only 11 years old because her father was going off on crusade
yeah.
and wanted her settled before he left. And the poor woman, I mean, she had something like, was it 13 or 14? She had a lot
A
of
lot.
children with
Yeah,
Robert de
yeah,
Beaumont, and her first was twin
yeah.
sons when she was just a
Who
teenager.
proved later on to
Um,
be fairly significant, the twins.
yes, Warenne and Robert de Beaumont. Yes, they helped to decide many events in the anarchy.
Politically very, very important later on. Anyway, so
Mm.
she has a lot of children with Robert de Beaumont, and then shortly after he dies,
He dies, and about 3 months later, she marries William de Warenne.
William was straight in there, no messing about.
Yeah, I see where Henry of Huntingdon got the idea they must have been having an affair because it was so quick. But at the same time, I understand why Isabel maybe saw William and thought, actually, I am on the market and somebody is going to, heiresses like Isabel de Vermandois were not going to stay single.
No, this is something that's totally alien almost to modern life, isn't it? The one thing which is hard to grasp is that when you were widowed, if you held a lot of land or whatever, or your husband had, you were an heiress,
Or you had children who did.
yeah, then you were going to be married to someone
Yes.
else. It was almost inevitable.
Yeah, it was. And if you didn't choose quickly, then the king would force somebody on you who you might not like and who might not be able to protect you, who might
Yeah,
just want to steal the lands of your children.
yeah,
He obviously knew William de Warenne. They moved in the same circles
yeah.
for a lot of years. And I can understand her going to somebody like William de Warenne, who was single, who needed an heir because he'd been Earl for something like 30 years and still hadn't been married and still didn't have children.
Was he a lot older than her, or were they
Yeah, he was about 60 when they married.
really? Had he been married before?
No, not that I can find.
No, that's unusual.
And and she was 30, somewhere around 30. So I get why they got married quickly because at least that way she got to choose her
Yeah.
husband, and he would protect her children from her first
Mm,
marriage, which he did. The one thing about this marriage with William and Isabel was William and Isabel had 3 sons and 2 daughters as well. So they had 5 children. And she had these, I think it was 9 children from her first marriage. And they had this blended family.
very modern.
Yeah, well, you see, they married in 1118 and their son was born in 1119. And you see throughout the first half of the 12th century, Warenne and Robert, the 2 eldest Beaumont boys, are in the company of the Earl of Surrey, William de Warenne. And Henry's deathbed in 1035, the Earls present are William de Warenne, Earl of Surrey, Warenne de Beaumont, Count of Mortain, Robert de Beaumont, Earl of Leicester, and then William de Warenne Jr.
Yeah,
So, 4 of the people are the Warenne family. And throughout then the anarchy, Warenne de Beaumont acts as the head of the family of both the Beaumonts and the Warrens. So William de Warren's sister Ada marries Henry of Huntingdon, the son of not the chronicler, Henry Earl of
yeah,
Huntingdon, the son of King David of Scots.
yeah,
And that marriage is with the permission and organisation of Warenne de Beaumont
yeah.
as the head of the family, rather than William de Warenne Ada's older brother.
And within that family group, eventually you've got about 6 earldoms, haven't you? You've got Leicester, you've got Worcester, you've got Surrey,
Yep.
Huntingdon. It's
Yep.
ridiculous.
And Warwick.
Yeah,
Because this is where it gets confusing because there's so many Williams. The second Earl's daughter, Gundred, married the Beaumont Earl of
yeah,
Warwick. He wasn't one of the brothers, he was the cousin of
yeah,
the Beaumont brothers.
yeah. So it's quite a powerhouse family,
Yeah.
really.
And it's the one thing I always get is why haven't we heard more about them? And I think it's because
Well,
they,
I think you're right at the beginning when you said, well, they're not much known because the family died out
yeah,
in the Middle Ages.
they died out in
Um,
1347. I think if they'd carried on into Tudor times,
yeah,
we would know so much more about them.
yeah. And the second Earl, he got his coat of arms from the Vermandois
Yes.
coat of arms, didn't he?
Yep.
This checkered golden blue.
Yeah, the blue and gold check is the arms of Vermandois, and he because I mean that's the other thing we always think about with we always go, oh, the coats of arms, they've had them since the Norman conquest. They didn't.
No, yeah, it was later, wasn't it?
They developed after the Norman conquest. So you have all these earls adopting other people's, arms from like
Yeah,
with Isabel, it was the arms of her father with the blue and gold check.
yeah,
So the Warren,
yeah,
he wanted to
yeah.
highlight his royal links. So he went with it.
So that, yeah, they're a family really that if you're looking at the Middle Ages, you really can't overlook because they're involved,
Mm,
a lot of the time.
yeah, they're at the center of almost everything. You pick an incident and there will be a Warren somewhere there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the rivalry between Henry I and his brother Robert and how Warren was involved in that. But the Warrens were also in the anarchy, as you mentioned the anarchy. They were involved because they supported William de Warren supported Stephen,
He did.
and I think he fought at the Battle of Lincoln, didn't he, when Stephen was
Yes.
defeated?
Yeah, he did.
Uh,
Not his greatest hour.
no, pivotal
Not
moment.
crowned
Well,
in glory.
potentially a pivotal moment in history, but didn't
Yes.
turn out to be quite as pivotal as everyone expected. Uh,
No.
but but yeah, the Warren was there, and at Magna Carta, a Warren was putting his seal to that, wasn't he?
Yeah, and
And was also involved in had a bit of a wobble, didn't he? The fifth Earl, I think it was,
yeah, he had a
had a bit of a wobble in
yeah,
1216.
he did. But then again, so did a lot of earls in 1216,
Yeah, I mean this is the moment when John dies and suddenly there's this civil war
Mm,
between Louis of France, who is invited by some of the English barons to come and be king, against the son of John, who is Henry, the young Henry III, who's a boy. So it's in that maelstrom.
yeah, well, what had happened was he had been on the side of John all through the Magna Carta crisis. William de Warenne was one of the lords who was at Northampton to negotiate with the rebels who would eventually force Magna Carta onto King John.
Yeah,
So he was right at the centre of negotiating with the rebel barons. So King John puts his seal to Magna Carta. Civil war begins because neither side wants to stick to it. And William de Warenne is still on John's side. But then in the beginning of 1216, the rebel barons
yeah,
invite the French to come and help and offer Louis the crown. And he lands
mm,
and starts making a lot of headway. So suddenly the barons are wavering because they've got a choice. You either support John and risk losing everything, or you throw yourself behind Louis now and hope that he rewards you for picking the winning side.
yeah,
So William de Warenne, his cousin William Longspay, Earl of Salisbury, who is also, well, he's married to William de Warenne's cousin, and he's also half brother of King John.
yeah.
Also, and the Fitzalan Earl of Arundel, all at the same time. I think they must have got together and gone, what should we do? Well, I think we're going to have to pick Louis.
Yeah.
So they all go over to Louis and at the same time.
Where does
And
Louis land in England? Does he land in the southeast?
yeah, oh yeah, it was definitely the southeast. It was on the Kent coast, and it was a
Because if he did, you can kind of see why the Fitzalans and the Warrens in particular would.
and he was holding court at Winchester, I think it was, when they went and
Yeah,
swore fealty to him. So he'd got control of most of the southeast, except for
yeah.
the castle at Dover, which, as we know from a previous episode, it was last but one, wasn't it? Hubert de Burgh was holding.
Hubert de Burgh was holding.
But then John dies.
Yeah.
And suddenly all the barons are wavering because at the same time, Louis is not handing out rewards to his English barons as much as he is to his French ones. So he's winning all this land in England. And instead of putting it under the control of the English lords who've sided with him, he's giving them the land to his French friends. So the English lords are now thinking that they may have picked the wrong side. And some of them, like William Longspay, once John's dead, see an opportunity, to return to the fold and go up to, I mean, Longspay especially, he's suddenly the uncle of the king. That's actually much more important than being the brother of the king.
Yeah.
So, so he goes off to William Marshal and says, I've always been your friend. William de Warenne takes a little while longer, but it seems that there were negotiations between him and Marshal in March 1217. But he doesn't actually come back into the fold until May or June 1217. So I think there's a little bit of negotiation going on.
He's hedging his bets, isn't he?
Yeah, or maybe he's spying on the French, or who knows, But
well, I don't know. I think they're always in it for themselves, these guys. I mean, as we've said countless times, it was all about the land they held and that gave them the power they had. So,
and I think with William, there's definitely something that he's just trying to get as much money as he can. Because as we said, after the Battle of Sandwich, he bought up all the lords who'd been captured during the sea battle, in the hope that he'd be getting these massive ransoms from them. And then William Marshal in the peace treaty with Louis said, just go home. We'll not collect any ransoms. And that sort of harmed the financial prospects of the fifth Earl.
well, that snookered his plan, didn't it? Yeah. But I mean, it shows how important the Warrens were over time in playing a part. It was important for William Marshal and the young Prince Henry that they got people like William Warren back in the fold.
Yeah.
As you say, Longspay had a reason. For Warren, it was really a question of, okay, who's going to offer me the best deal?
It's also, they're all family.
Yeah.
William de Warren's cousin is married to the Earl of Salisbury. Ella of Salisbury is William's cousin. His grandmother, Ella de Talvis, married the Earl of Salisbury after the death of the third Earl of Surrey. So they're all really closely related. And then the fifth Earl actually does marry Marshal's oldest daughter in 1225 in a similar situation as Isabel de Vermandois. Her Matilda Marshal's first husband, the Bigot Earl of Norfolk, dies in 1225, and within a couple of months she's married to William de Warenne, and that is always seen as a marriage of convenience. They had two children, but they were very much living their own lives otherwise, and they're not buried together. There's no suggestion of a kidnapping and a great love story in their relationship.
No, but I guess it's houses being merged, it's fortunes being connected, so that I mean, that carries on throughout, not exactly time, but it carries on for hundreds of years.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the Warrens are a prime example of how all these noble families are interconnected. William's grandfather was Geoffrey of Anjou.
Right. Yeah.
William's father, Hamelin, was the illegitimate son of Geoffrey of Anjou. So he was half brother to Henry II, uncle of Richard the Lionheart and King John and William Longspay. So you look at all these connections, and of course, as a result of Ada de Warenne marrying the son of the King of Scots, the Surreys were also related to Malcolm the Maiden, King of Scots, William the Lion, who actually called himself William de Warenne until he became king.
Mm.
William the Lion, King of Scots. He was part of the rebels after Magna Carta was sealed. It just showed how these families were all interconnected, and people like the Warrens were right at the center of it. They knew everybody.
Yeah, and I think again we tend to, when we look at these relationships, we tend to regard the important relationships as the legitimate ones. But at the time, illegitimacy was it was a practical issue. And in terms of how you related to individuals, it was kind of irrelevant because you have people who are illegitimate sons or brothers or whatever, half brothers and all the rest of it, who actually get on really well and support each
Yes.
other. But that's kind of been obscured a bit by people looking at genealogies and saying, oh, well, he was illegitimate, so he sort of kind of doesn't count. But at the time, he does count. He
Yeah.
is involved very often. Whoever it
Yeah.
may be is involved.
I mean, you see comments every now and then where somebody says, where you say Robert of Gloucester was Empress Matilda's brother,
Yeah,
and somebody will always go, half brother.
yeah.
And it's like, do you really think that she'd go, oh, hello, half brother, rather than hello, brother?
Yeah,
It's a significant difference for
yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah.
But in everyday life, when you're just talking to each other, you're going to see him as your brother.
I wonder in the future whether, with so many modern blended families and all the rest of it, whether that will change.
Mm,
Whether that will change people's perspective on that particular issue. I don't know, but yeah,
I don't,
it's always amused me a bit that, people can kind of almost be written out
yeah.
because they're illegitimate and the way people look at that, and that's probably the Victorians.
Yeah.
But but
But
you
yeah,
know,
that's
in
definitely something.
reality, they were still remarkably important at
Yeah.
times, and no one more important than Robert of Gloucester, of course.
Yeah. And they were raised alongside each other.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
brothers and half brothers. Look at Henry IV and the
yeah. The
Beaufort
Beauforts.
siblings.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's just, but it just makes me laugh where people go, well, they were only half siblings. And it's like, do you really think that when they were in the nursery, they were told you're only half siblings? Because
yeah.
Robert of Gloucester obviously didn't think of himself as only and half sibling of Empress Matilda.
I think the whole legitimacy thing really only affects inheritance,
Mm,
and in terms of relationships, we should ignore it almost because their relationship is still there.
yeah.
That if they're brought up together or if they know each other, they're in the same country, that they're involved in the same
Mm,
family events, then they are essentially close relatives. And it's only in the area of inheritance that we get into something
yes.
which is changed by their legitimacy or illegitimacy.
Yeah. And when we were looking at Henry I and at Henry I's illegitimate daughters, you look at it, and Henry I had this brilliant idea. He failed, unfortunately, because his one legitimate son died too young.
Yeah,
But the idea was you've got one who will take the crown, and he has all these brothers who will support him because they're his brother,
yeah,
but they have no claim on the crown.
no,
So he's got these loyal brothers with no claim, but they support him because then their king, their brother, will give them rewards and lands. And it's same with the girls, you can marry them off, and you marry them off to give them a familial relationship with the King of England, but no claim on the crown.
yeah,
And Henry II had this illegitimate half brother, Hamlin Plantagenet. And it shows how legitimate sons saw these illegitimate
yeah,
brothers because they looked after them. They didn't think, oh no, he's an embarrassment, we'll
yeah.
keep him in Touraine and forget about him.
Put him in a
He
cupboard.
when Isabel de Warrenne's first husband, William of Blois, the son of King Stephen, died, she was first suggested as a bride for William of Anjou, Henry II's youngest legitimate brother. And Thomas Becket actually forbid the marriage, not because Isabel and William of Anjou were too closely related, but because William of Anjou was too closely related to Isabel's first husband, William of Blois, because they were cousins. So Henry decided that actually, the Warenne, as we've said, the Warenne lands, the lands of the Earl of Surrey, were massive. She owed 60 knights' fees to the crown. Henry still wanted those lands attached to the crown. And if William, his younger brother, couldn't have them, he had an illegitimate half-brother who had no relationship with William of Blois or Isabel de Warenne. There was no blood relationship there to put the mockers on it. So he arranged the marriage of Isabel and Hamlin. Hamlin is one of my favorites, mainly because his name's not William, but also, he was obviously well aware of his illegitimate status, because as soon as he married Isabel, he took her name. So my book would have been half as long if it wasn't for Hamlin, because the Warrens would have died out nearly 2 centuries before they did. But he was rewarded for his support, and he did. He was a constant support to Henry II. He wasn't very much of an imaginative earl, but he was very loyal, and he supported Henry II and then Richard the Lionheart. And he stayed on Richard's side even when John rebelled. And then when Richard died, he supported John, even though John had had an affair with one of his daughters and got her pregnant. So,
yeah, that's John for you, yes. I mean, forgetting for a minute about how they regarded each other, these familial relationships, as far as other people were concerned, they were thinking of him as, let's say, Hamlin, for example. He could be described as the king's brother.
Yeah, nobody's going to say the king's half-brother,
you think of him as the king's brother. You don't, other people don't think of him as the king's half-brother. They know he's the king's half-brother, but he's the king's brother in terms of his importance and what that might do for you as somebody beneath that tier of society. So it's just a different way of looking at it.
And he's an earl, so you're not going to go to him, oh, you're the king's illegitimate half-brother, aren't you? No, he's a powerful man.
Bastard brother, eh? Well, never mind.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. We see bastardy these days, illegitimacy, as a stain. But in those days, if they were illegitimate, they were often called the bastard.
It's a bit weird in a way because that's not really the case in modern society at all.
No,
is it?
But I think you're right. I think it's the Victorians.
But we haven't kind of applied that.
Yeah.
We're still almost working with a Victorian mindset as far as historical relations are concerned. So it seems to me we're in the odd situation in 2026 of putting what is essentially a previous social mindset and applying it to the Middle Ages, where that mindset did not apply anyway.
Yeah, and they looked after their illegitimate children. There's a brilliant book that was published a few years ago. I can't remember the name of the author. It might be Helen Matthews, called The Legitimacy of Bastards.
Nice title.
And she did a brilliant study of illegitimacy in medieval England and how it affected people, but also, how they could get around, how it wasn't as big a stain. But in some places it was, like if you were illegitimate in the church, you wouldn't be able to attain a high office, which is one of the reasons John of Gaunt got his Beaufort's children legitimised. The only reason Henry Beaufort became a cardinal was because he was legitimate. If he'd been illegitimate, he couldn't have achieved that.
Yeah, but when you think about it, if it's possible to legitimize somebody, then that kind of sort of makes it not so much of a big deal. If you're rich, obviously, and powerful, you can achieve that.
Yeah.
maybe if you're not so rich and powerful, that's not something you can achieve anyway.
Well, also, anyone who knows history who's listening to this can also go to meet Sharon. But what about Geoffrey, who was the son of Henry II, definitely illegitimate, and made Archbishop of York, and he was never legitimised. So the rules weren't universally
Yeah,
applied.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's we mentioned the church just then. So how were the Warrens sort of staunch supporters of the church, or were they at odds with the church? We mentioned a couple of things in passing, which might suggest they were at odds with the church. But how does it work? What happened?
Primarily, they were on good terms with the church. And
Right.
William and Gundrada, the first Earl and his wife, they did in 1070 or 1071 go on pilgrimage to Rome. Unfortunately, they never got there because there was war in the Papal State, so they had to divert to the Abbey of Cluny, where you remember Gerbod, who'd killed his lord and offered to cut off his hand
Vividly.
and was told to join a monastery. Well, he joined the monastery at Cluny. So William and Gundrada diverted to Cluny, probably to visit her brother, and got on really well with the abbot. And when they got back to England, they founded Lewes Priory, Priory of St Pancras, in the Cluniac order.
Right. Okay. So they were not exactly converts to it, but they wanted to support it.
So they supported the Cluniac order. They wrote to the abbey at Cluny and said, "Can you send us a prior and some monks to found this order?"
You
And
can
they
walk
did.
round the ruins, can't you? I walked around the
Yeah,
ruins of Lewes
and it's
Priory.
the first Cluniac priory in England.
Yeah.
And all the Cluniac foundations in England are priories. There's only one abbey, which is Cluny itself. So they were all subject to control from Cluny rather than within England, which would cause problems under Edward I, who didn't like anyone owing allegiance outside of England.
And is the idea of setting up a priory or an abbey, is that just solely to do with ensuring that your soul is going to be looked after your death, or is there any other reason why you do
Primarily, it doesn't hurt to give a nod to the church,
it?
and especially when you've already upset the Abbey of Ely and things like that. So
Had he already done that? That already happened.
I'm trying to remember if he'd already
Sheep
done that or
stealing
not. I
in
think
Norfolk.
he might have. Yeah. And then they founded Castleacre Priory, was the second priory they founded, which was also on their lands. But Lewes is the one that became the family mausoleum.
Yeah,
William and Gundrada were buried there.
yeah, that's the centre, isn't it? Lewis is the centre of the
Yeah,
Warren inheritance.
when those nasty Victorians decided to dig a railway through Lewes, they actually found the bodies, the coffins of William and Gundrada, and dug them up. They didn't find anybody else's, which is funny because there's a good few earls buried there, but they only found William and Gundrada, and they're now in the church next door in the Gundrada Chapel, which I think is brilliant that they did it.
Mm.
They found both their bones, but they found the coffin plate, the coffin stone of Gundrada with her memorial on it, and that's in the centre of the Gundrada Chapel, St John's at Southover.
Mm.
Hamlin had an argument with the priory at Lewes because he wanted to decide who the next prior was, and the abbot of Cluny wanted to decide who the next prior was, and there was this long-running dispute between.
When was that Henry II's reign, or
Yeah, I think it was part of this whole investiture controversy.
I was going to
Yeah,
say it's all part of this church versus state or laity, isn't it?
we founded the priory, so we should have a say. But we're the Cluniacs, so we should have a say. It's like, oh god,
Yeah,
my, my sword's bigger than your sword, thing type of thing.
yeah. But it is interesting that dispute, which was
Yeah,
playing out at a national, international level, was also playing out at local level as well. And I'm sure they couldn't have been the only ones who had an element of dispute in appointment.
No, I'm sure there weren't. It's funny, in that 100 years, every time, it's only recently that I've looked at, every time I've seen something like this argument between state or secular
Yeah.
lords and church, you suddenly think, oh, actually, that's investiture controversy. It'd be interesting to see if anyone actually goes
Yeah.
through and sees what all these arguments are, because it even reached Scotland. There was a bishop of St Andrews who the king refused to allow him to take the bishopric because he hadn't chosen him, and he wouldn't he wouldn't be invested by the king because he should be invested by the church, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's been played out all over the place, isn't it?
So it's interesting to see it on a local level, and like you say, the international level as well.
And the second William de Warenne, didn't he go on the First Crusade?
No, it was the third Earl.
The third Earl.
He went on the Second Crusade with his cousin Louis VII and Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Name dropping.
And his older brother Warenne. Warenne and William went on the Second Crusade in 1147 because they're probably sick of doing the warlike fighting in England, so they thought they'd go and do it somewhere else.
Well, yeah, there was a bit of a moment, wasn't there, during the anarchy when I think they were all a bit fed up with what was going on in England, and there was also a bit of a lull as well. And some of them beetled off on crusade and thought, well, we might as well fight for this rather than
definitely
going around in England.
Unfortunately, I mean, third Earl, when he did it, his daughter was about 8 years old, so he arranged her marriage before he went to William of Blois, Stephen's son, who was also about 8 years old. That's another one where if you look at older books, they go, she was 16 and he was 8. And it's like, she couldn't have been 16. He wasn't born until 1119. He went off on crusade in 1147. So if she'd been 16 or 18, then she'd have been born when he was 10. So she was about 8. And of course, William arranged her marriage to the son of the king so that the king would look after his lands and make sure they were safe until he returned. And it's really poignant when you look at the charters from that time, because they're issued in the name of William of Blois as the future Earl, but to be ratified by the Earl if he ever returns. And of course he doesn't, because he's killed at the Battle of Mount Cadmos. And I never actually found out what happened to his body. Somebody I read suggested that he was buried somewhere in England, but it was a church that had no relationship with the Warrens. But they said that this is the tomb of the third Earl. But I've never seen anything that suggested his body was brought home. And if it was, why wouldn't he have been buried at Lewes Priory with his parents? So I don't think his body was ever brought home. News that he was killed would have come home with his brother Warenne. Warenne de Beaumont. He did make it home. And then, of course, Isabel is married to William of Blois, the younger son of King Stephen, who is disinherited by his father in 1153 in favour of Henry of Anjou, the son of...
Yeah, he makes his the Treaty of Westminster with Henry, the young Henry, who becomes Henry II, doesn't he? And that sort of disinherits his younger son, William.
And I feel for William in that. And there's, again, loads of books say, oh, William wasn't bothered. And it's like, they just conveniently ignore the fact he hired Flemish mercenaries to ambush Henry on his way back to Dover. Unfortunately, William fell off his horse and broke his leg before the ambush could be executed, and Henry made it to Dover, back to Normandy, and didn't come back until Stephen was safely dead.
Kind of sounds a bit like a knee-jerk reaction to the whole thing, and then probably thought better of it.
And he was given lots of lands in compensation and guaranteed to inherit all his mother's lands and all his father's lands, as well as the Surrey lands as from his wife. But then when Henry II does become king in 1154, You see an awful lot of William of Blois being in Henry II's company, going off to war with Henry II, having to leave Isabel behind and all this kind of thing for the next 6 or 8 years.
Yeah, he's keeping him with him because it's safer to have him with him than somewhere else.
Yeah, because, and not just because he might be plotting, but because if he is actually allowed to spend time with his wife, they might have children. And a rival dynasty to the Plantagenets, especially when you think what John was like. If there'd been a descendant of King Stephen in John's time who's capable of raising an army because they've got land in 13 counties and a very rich inheritance, things could have turned out awfully different.
That could have been a bit of a death sentence for them under John, but a long prison
Yeah,
spell.
exactly.
We talked a lot about the men. We've occasionally mentioned the women, but there are a couple of occasions in the Warrens family history when some of the women come to the fore, aren't there?
Yeah.
They play quite a significant role.
Two of my favourites, Gundred, the daughter of the second Earl, who married Roger de Beaumont, Earl of Warwick. And during the anarchy, it's always the anarchy.
Yeah.
But Roger was a firm supporter of King Stephen. But towards the end of the anarchy, of course, Henry's gaining popularity, fighting his way through England. He gets knighted by King David of Scotland, and then he finds himself in front of the castle at Warwick, while Roger is in attendance on the king. So the castle is held by Gundred. Henry persuades Gundred to hand over the keys to the castle and hand over the castle to Henry. And I think Gundred is being quite sensible. She knows which way the wind is blowing. Henry's getting stronger and more powerful, and Stephen is going to die at some point. And she probably thinks, I can't see Stephen beating this young whippersnapper. So she chooses a side. Unfortunately, her husband isn't too happy about it. Apparently, he is so embarrassed and shocked when he hears the news that his wife's handed over Warwick Castle to Henry that he drops dead on the spot.
There's a lot of that going on. It's a family tradition. Dropping dead.
I like her. I mean, sorry to Roger of Beaumont.
So does she marry again?
She marries again, yes, a couple of times actually, and has children, and her son by Roger inherits the earldom of Warwick. So yeah, the other one I like is Isabel d'Aubigny, who was the daughter of the 5th Earl, and she was only a child when her father died, and she was married at the age of 8.
So we're talking about 1200s?
1230s, 1240s.
Yeah.
She was married at the age of 8 and to the Earl of Arundel, and widowed at the age of about 16, 17. But she decided at that point that she wasn't going to marry again. She never had didn't have any children by her husband, but she decided that was it. She wasn't marrying again. Even though Henry III had sold her marriage to somebody, she actually paid Henry even more to stay single, because this is after Magna Carta, so women have a few rights now over their inheritance.
Yeah.
But the story that I love about Isabel is that one of her tenants died, and his son was underage. So his son was taken into wardship, and the king appropriated all of his lands to hand over to Roger Chasebourg, I think it was, to look after until the boy was old enough. Unfortunately, not all of the lands were held from the king. Some of the lands were held from Isabel. But Henry just grouped them all together and took control of all of them. And Isabel was like, oi, that's my land. And she actually went to court to have a go to try and get her lands back. And Henry said, by what right do you claim these lands? And she said, by Magna Carta. And she did this big speech about where are the liberties of England so often ransomed. And she really told Henry off. In the end, Isabel had to take him to the courts, and the courts actually found against her. So she then wrote to the king and said, this isn't fair. And the king was in France at the time, and Eleanor of Provence was regent. And he wrote to Eleanor and said, all right, give Isabel what she wants and give her a pardon, so long as she says nothing opprobrious to me as she has done before. So long as she doesn't tell me off again, she can have her lands back. So I really like Isabel because I've just got this image of her in this court, attending court with all these nobles, all men around her, and she's standing up for herself.
Yeah, I do sort of wonder though, the fact that that point about widows and land and so on was in Magna Carta kind of suggests that there were already women who had been complaining
Yes.
about this over a long period of time, noble women, and therefore it was an issue that had come up a lot. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been mentioned, would it?
It was definitely an issue that, unscrupulous barons and kings were doing. And there is, I mean, you see it a lot. The sixth Earl, John, who was the son of William the Fifth Earl and Matilda Marshall, he was he 8 years old when his dad died, or even younger, and he was in wardship, and the chap who was looking after his lands was selling off some of the lands to make money for less than they were worth. And John, when he inherited, when he actually came into his own lands when he was 21, was not happy about it, and he took this chap to court and everything, because it's like, he sold off my lands. And he's actually, when you're a guardian of somebody who is in wardship, you're supposed to do what's in the best interests of your ward, not yourself. You can take the income from the lands whilst you're looking after them as payment, but you're supposed to give the lands back in their entirety, not sell them off to make even more money.
Okay, so who was the last Earl Warenne then? Who was the last of the line? Because the line, obviously, we said earlier, doesn't survive the Middle Ages.
No, he dies out in 1347. The last Earl was John.
Right, the one we just mentioned.
No.
Another John.
The one we've just mentioned is John the First.
Right.
He was a cousin of Edward the First. So, and then he had a son, William, who died while his father was still alive. He was killed in a jousting accident.
Oh, right.
And his daughter, Alice, wasn't even born yet when her dad died. So it's quite a tragic start to life for poor John the Second.
Yeah.
So John the Second, then he marries Edward the First's granddaughter, Joan of Bar, who is 10 years old. So you got this 20-year-old young man married to a 10-year-old girl.
He told me he doesn't have any children with Joan. Is that where we're going?
He doesn't have any children with Joan. He tries his best to get a divorce by claiming they're too closely related by blood, because they were cousins. They're second or third cousins. His girlfriend, Maud Nerford, claims there's a pre-contract, and he was already married. She was already married to John, so he couldn't marry Joan.
No.
It's funny how John never mentioned that at the time of the wedding. And then John comes up with another one near the end, which is basically that he'd had a relationship with Joan's aunt, so the marriage should be dissolved. Joan's aunt was Mary of Woodstock, who had been a nun since she was the age of 7. But she was conveniently dead, so she couldn't refute this claim. And she did have a bit of a reputation of spending more time at court than in the nunnery.
So he didn't have any children at all, or he did have...
He had no legitimate children. When he died, he had 9, I think it was, surviving children, all of whom he left things in his will.
But what he didn't leave was the old...
But what he didn't leave was a legitimate child. So I get a lot of people getting in touch with me saying I'm descended from the Warrens. And at the last Earl, and I said, I'm so sorry, it is illegitimate. You do know that, don't you? There's no legitimate descent from the last Earl of Warren. So the lands went to his sister's son, Richard FitzAlan, Earl of Arundel.
I mean, the FitzAlans, that's kind of neighbours as well, aren't they? Are they still at Arundel? Are they still at Arundel at that point?
Yes, they got Arundel Castle, and they, of course, are descended from Adeliza of Louvain, Henry
Yeah,
I's second wife. So
yeah.
the lands in Norfolk and Surrey went to his nephew, Richard FitzAlan. The Yorkshire lands went to the Crown. So Conisbrough and Sandal went to Edward III.
Yeah, so that is the end of the Warrens then.
It is, yeah. It was a rather an ignominious end. They didn't necessarily fall, or there was no executions. It was just died out as a result of a really unhappy marriage.
Yeah, but that is sort of what happened to quite a lot of families, isn't it?
Mm,
Over time,
yeah.
they happened to be a very prominent family that it happened to, but it was happening to noble and baronial
Yes.
families all the time, and the lands were going, estates and titles were going
Yeah.
sideways, as it were, to via a marriage. That was
Yeah.
one of the reasons for making sure you married the right people.
But then again, on the coronation of King Charles III and at the funeral of Elizabeth II, the Warren blue and gold check was in prominence on the altar at the Queen's funeral, and the Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk, who arranged everything for the coronation, is a direct descendant of the Warrens.
Yeah, the Howards.
Yeah, they're direct descendants, as is King Charles III himself. He's descended from
Yeah,
Ada de Warenne, who married Henry, the son of the King of Scots, way
yeah.
back in the 12th century.
There's still a bit of Warren blood sloshing about.
So they're still there. They just, the name's not
Well,
there.
that's interesting to know.
So the second Earl, who was so keen on having a royal bride, his descendant is on the throne of England. So I think he'd be happy about that. Sorry,
Yeah,
the throne of
yeah,
Britain. So he'd be really happy about
yeah.
that.
What we said about Hubert de Burgh is almost forgotten, hardly known by anyone generally today, but very important at the time. The Warrens were important for quite a long time.
Yeah, and we tend to concentrate on the kings and the queens,
Yeah,
and we talk
yeah.
about who served them. But I think nowadays we're getting a bit more focus on the idea of looking at them as individuals, because although yes, they were there to serve the king, they did have their own interests, which is why they would change sides and things like that.
Well, they didn't exist to serve the
No.
king. They did serve the king,
Mm,
but they existed as rulers in their own domains,
yeah.
really.
And it's interesting to see how they reacted and what actions they took when the king's interests didn't match their own.
Yeah.
I think we forget that these nobles had a very narrow line
Mm.
that they had to walk to keep everybody happy.
Yes. Right. Okay. The Warrens are done.
Thank you very much for letting me talk about the Warrens.
Well, I'm glad you were talking about the Warrens because you know more about them than I do. But I know even more now.
All right. Well, thank you very much for letting me waffle on about the Warrens, Derek. Yeah, so do join us next time when we'll be chatting with Stephen V. Rappen about his new book, Overlord, looking into the life and career of Henry VIII.
A little known King of England.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And I'm Derek Birks. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the podcast for Henry VIII.